GreyGray Tale-Tale.
Check it.
I woke up to a stranger in my bed, yes, a freaking sexy stranger. You ever wake up and immediately know you've made a terrible mistake? Well, let me tell you about the morning that changed my entire life, and not in the way you'd expect. I was 28 years old, living in this nice apartment complex downtown. I'd just gotten a promotion at work, finally felt like I was getting my life together, you know. But I still had this habit of partying way too hard on weekends. Last Saturday was no different, or so I thought. Before I go on, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so GreyGray can know the mistake I made. Now, let's dive right in. My buddy Jake was celebrating his engagement, so naturally we hit every bar in the city. Shots, beers, more shots, the whole 9 yards. I remember dancing badly, laughing too loud, and definitely drinking way more than I should have. The last clear memory I have is stumbling into an Uber around 2 a.m., mumbling my address to the driver. Then I woke up. The first thing I noticed was the sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains. That should have been my first clue. My apartment faces east, but this light was coming from the wrong direction. The second thing I noticed was the smell. Vanilla and something floral, definitely not my usual cologne and pizza-scented bedroom. But the third thing, that's what nearly gave me a heart attack. There was someone in my bed, a woman. A beautiful woman with long dark hair spread across the pillow, sleeping peacefully like she belonged there. My mind went completely blank. I'm talking full system. Shut down. I sat up slowly, trying not to wake her, trying to piece together what the hell had happened. The room was definitely not mine, different furniture, different colors, family photos on the nightstand that I'd never seen before. Photos of this woman with 2 little kids and a man who definitely wasn't me. Oh God. Oh no. This woman was married, with children, and I was in her bed. I started panicking, like full-on hyperventilating. What had I done? What had we done? I couldn't remember anything after getting in that Uber. Had I somehow ended up in the wrong apartment? Did I break in? Was I about to be arrested? The woman stirred and opened her eyes. They were this gorgeous green color, but right now they looked as confused and horrified as I felt. She sat up, clutching the sheets to her chest, staring at me like I was an alien. We both just sat there for what felt like forever, trying to process the situation. Finally, she spoke, and her voice was shaky but kind. She told me her name was Sarah and that I lived in the apartment directly below hers. Apparently, I'd been trying to get into my own place but kept fumbling with my keys. She'd been coming home from a night out with friends and found me passed out in the hallway. Being a decent human being, she'd helped me up to her apartment to make sure I was okay. What happened next was still fuzzy for both of us. We talked, shared some water and aspirin, and somehow ended up well here. Neither of us could remember the details clearly, but the evidence was pretty obvious. I felt sick, not from the hangover, though that was brutal, but from the guilt. I'd slept with a married woman, a mother. I'd helped break up a family without even knowing it. Sarah seemed to read my thoughts. She told me not to worry about it, that it was just one of those things that happened. But I could see in her eyes that she was just as freaked out as I was. I got dressed quickly and practically ran out of there. I spent the rest of the day pacing my apartment, wondering if her husband would come looking for me, if I should move, if I should pretend this never happened. But here's the thing about living in the same building. It's pretty hard to avoid someone completely. Over the next few days, I kept running into Sarah in the hallway by the mailboxes in the parking garage. And every time, there was this awkward tension between us. She'd give me these small, embarrassed smiles, and I'd mumble something about the weather before practically sprinting away. It was torture. But I also found myself looking forward to these brief encounters, which made me feel even worse about myself. About a week later, I was coming home from work when I heard shouting from upstairs. Loud, angry voices. A man and a woman. I tried to mind my own business, but it was hard to ignore. Especially when I recognized Sarah's voice, the fighting went. On 4 hours, I heard doors slamming, footsteps stomping around, more yelling. Then everything went quiet. Around 10 p.m., I heard heavy footsteps in the hallway and the sound of someone dragging luggage. The next morning, I ran into Sarah by the mailboxes again. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept in days. Her eyes were red, and she was clearly trying to hold herself together. I asked if she was okay, and that's when she broke down. Right there in the lobby, she started crying. Not wanting to leave her like that, I suggested we go somewhere to talk. We ended up at a little coffee shop around the corner. That's when she told me everything. Her marriage had been falling apart for months. She and her husband had been sleeping in separate rooms, barely speaking except to argue about the kids or bills. The night we met, she'd been out with friends, trying to forget about the divorce papers she'd been served that morning. She said meeting me hadn't caused anything. It was just the final straw in a relationship that was already over. Her husband had moved out that week and they were working out custody arrangements for their 2 kids. I felt this massive weight lift off my shoulders. I hadn't been the other man. I hadn't destroyed a happy marriage. But then I felt something else, a strange kind of relief that she was single. Over the following weeks, we started talking more. Just casual conversations in the hallway at first, then longer chats by the mailboxes. She told me about the challenges of being a single mom, about starting over at 32, about how scared she was about the future I found myself wanting. To help, I'd offer to carry her groceries, to watch her kids for a few minutes while she grabbed something from her car. Small things, but they felt important. Her kids were amazing, by the way. Emma was 7 and had this infectious laugh, and little Connor was 5 and obsessed with dinosaurs. They started warming up to me, asking me to play games or read them. Stories when I was around. Sarah would always apologize for them bothering me, but honestly, I loved it. I'd never been around kids much, but these two made me understand why people wanted families. Gradually, Sarah and I became friends, real friends. We'd have coffee together in the mornings before work. She'd cook dinner for 3 and invite me up to share it. We'd watch movies together after the kids went to bed. I started to see who she really was, not just the woman I'd woken up next to in a moment of confusion, but this incredible person who was handling an impossible situation with grace and strength. She was funny, smart, caring, and despite everything she was going through, she always seemed to find reasons to smile. I was falling for her. Hard, but I didn't know how to handle it. Was it too soon after her divorce? Was I taking advantage of her vulnerability? Was it weird given how we'd met? One evening, about 2 months after that first morning, we were sitting on her balcony after the kids had gone to bed. She was telling me about her day, laughing about something Emma had said at school, and I just found myself staring at her. She caught me looking and asked what I was thinking about. And in that moment, I decided to be honest. I told her that I was falling in love with her, that I knew the timing was complicated and our situation was unusual, but I couldn't pretend anymore. That what I felt was just friendship. She went quiet for a long time. I was sure I'd ruined everything, that she'd ask me to leave and we'd go back to being awkward strangers in the hallway. But then she smiled, really smiled. For the first time since I'd known her, she told me she'd been feeling the same way but was scared to admit it. Scared that it was too soon, scared that she was just looking for someone to help her through the divorce, scared that I'd think she was damaged goods. I told her she wasn't damaged goods. She was perfect, complicated, yes, but perfect for me. We talked until 3 in the morning that night. About our fears, our hopes, about what it would mean to try to build something together. We agreed to take things slow, to be careful with the kids' feelings, to be honest about what we were both going through. Our first official date was a disaster. By the way, we went to this fancy restaurant and were both so nervous we barely ate anything. We kept talking over each other and apologizing for talking over each other. Finally, Sarah started laughing at how ridiculous we were being, and that broke the tension. We ended up at a 24-hour diner, eating pancakes at midnight and talking like we had on all those evenings on her balcony. That's when I knew we were going to be okay. It wasn't easy, dating a single mom going through a divorce. There were custody battles, financial stress, nights when the kids missed their dad and took it out on me. There were times when Sarah's ex-husband would show up and make things uncomfortable, times when I wondered if I wasn't over my head. But there were also Sunday morning breakfasts with all four of us, bedtime stories, family movie nights, and quiet moments after the kids were asleep when Sarah and I would just hold each other and marvel at how we'd found each other. 6 months later, Sarah's divorce was finalized. A year after that, I proposed. Not with some grand gesture, just a quiet moment in her kitchen while she was making coffee and the kids were arguing about cartoons in the living room. Real life. Messy and beautiful and perfect, she said yes, obviously. Emma and Connor were more excited about the ring than Sarah was, which tells you everything you need to know about how well we'd all bonded. We got married in a small ceremony in her parents' backyard. Emma was the flower girl, Connor was the ring bearer, and Sarah looked absolutely radiant in a simple white dress. It wasn't the wedding either of us had imagined, but it was exactly what we needed. That was 3 years ago. We're still in the same apartment building, actually. We took over the unit next to mine when it became available, gave the kids their own rooms, and turned my old place into a home office. Sometimes I think about that morning I woke up confused and terrified. If you'd told me then that the woman in the bed would become my wife, that her kids would become my kids, that one drunken mistake would lead to the greatest love of my life, I'd have thought you were insane. But life's funny like that, isn't it? Sometimes the worst morning of your life turns out to be the beginning of your happily ever after. And yes, we still laugh about how we met. Sarah likes to tell people I literally fell into her life. I prefer to say I was just in the right place at the right time, even if I was too drunk to remember it. The best love stories don't always start with love at first sight. Sometimes they start with confusion, panic, and a really bad hangover. But if you're lucky, really lucky, they end with a family, a home, and someone who loves you even when you're at your most ridiculous.